Hey everybody, Jem Schofield here, and welcome to the 4K for 10K camera series. If you have not yet done so, please check out the overview video where I talk about the criteria for the 6 candidate cameras that we are featuring. I also want to mention that this series is not about doing a direct comparison between the cameras. It is not a video-based user manual for each of the cameras, nor in-depth reviews of the cameras that are featured. The whole purpose of this series is to help you figure out which camera or cameras that we are covering might be right for your productions. A camera series would not be complete without some test footage. So we decided that we were going to record to each of these cameras internally at their highest resolution and at the best formats and codecs that they could record to internally. And in this particular video, we're going to be taking a look at the URSA Mini Pro 4.6K camera, so let's get started. The first thing we want to do for the camera is take a look at what it comes with and how to build it out for shooting. And the URSA Mini Pro 4.6K is kind of unique in the sense that it really is modular, but it does also come in kit configuration. So the thing to understand is that you have the camera body itself with the grip, and that is the base of the URSA Mini Pro 4.6K, and then you add all of these other components, still well under $10,000 US, to have a camera system that is ready to shoot with. So the first thing that you're going to need, without a doubt, is going to be power, because unique to this camera, of all of the 6 cameras in the series, there is no battery or battery solution that comes with the camera system standardly. So there's 2 ways that you can do that. You can either buy the camera system as a kit, which will have the battery mount of your choice, either V-mount lock or AB gold mount, or you can just buy the camera body with the grip unit if you already have batteries that are either V-mount lock or AB gold mount, and you can just buy this battery plate and it's under $100 US. Now, the second thing that you want to add to this camera system for small to no crew, and pretty much any shooting that you're going to do with the URSA Mini Pro, is you're going to want to add that shoulder mount kit. And it comes with 3 components. We get the shoulder mount itself, which is actually very comfortable and is also VCT base plate compatible. So it'll pop right into a VCT base plate. It comes with the handle itself, and it also comes with this additional arm, which is the thing that allows us to get this grip away from the camera body and into that more standard configuration. Now, when you're doing that and you're in that standard configuration, using the LCD screen generally isn't ideal, especially when you're shooting outdoors, and also because of its placement. So the last component for me really is this URSA Mini Pro viewfinder. And this viewfinder for me is, quite honestly, for the price, an excellent quality viewfinder, and it really takes this camera system and completes it, and also makes it very, very unique to the cameras in the series. We can get that up on our shoulder in a very, very comfortable way. Those are the main components in terms of the parts of the URSA Mini Pro 4.6K. Let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the specifications of the camera system. The lens mount is EF based in its basic configuration, but you can in fact change these lens mounts to PL, B4, or F mount. It is a super 35mm base sensor. It's 4.6K, and you can in fact record directly internally to the camera in 4.6K resolution, which is pretty unique. And if I just lens this right now, because I don't like leaving a body cap off for a long period of time, and we go ahead and throw a battery onto this camera, we are fully built out in the configuration that I think most people would be using this camera in. So now that we have the camera built, let's go ahead and take a look at some of the exterior features of the camera that are really designed for that single operator in mind. First one is our ND filter wheel here, very easy. In position 1, that's clear. Then we go to position 2, that's 2 stops of ND. We go to position 3, that's 4 stops, and then position 4, that's 6 stops of neutral density being applied to your image. And then we have access to one of my favorite things on the camera system right here, which are these 3 switches. And with the camera on, and we can see that over here, and let's just go ahead and turn that on a little bit brighter so you can see it. We can see a lot of our camera data here on this outside LCD screen, but we can also quickly and easily, without going into menus, we can change things like our ISO, our shutter, and also our white balance or color temperature for the camera by just using these switches, and they're very, very tactile, which I like very much. Now we're just going to go ahead and pan to the back of the camera system here and take a look at the ports. And if we take a look at these are pretty standard and really nice to see these on a camera system that's under $10,000 US. We have SDI out, and that is actually capable of pushing out a full DCI 4K 4096 by 2160 out. It's a 12G SDI out at up to 60 frames per second. We also have our SDI in, and most importantly, on a camera system under $10,000, especially in multicam situations, we have a time code and reference in port. It's really nice to see that. And then of course, this is if we were powering off of mains and our headphone jack. And then when we pan over here to this part of the camera system, this is really what's feeding that viewfinder here. So we've got our power to the viewfinder, and then we actually have our video signal. The power, of course, is coming from that battery system on the back of the camera. And then moving over to our actual grip itself, in terms of making adjustments, that it's not as quick and easy as some of the grips are on the market here. So you do have to pop this up and actually make the adjustment. But because it's based on this airy rosette system, it is quite easy to make adjustments to the grip unit. And then we'll pan over here to the viewfinder again that we talked about briefly before. And you'll see here that we have the diopter, which is very, very adjustable for lots of different types of shooters. 3 assignable buttons, which by default are zoom, display, and peaking. And it does have its own dedicated menu system. And if we just go ahead now and we pan over here, we'll go back to the screen on the actual unit itself. We'll open that up, which gives us access to additional functions. So really tons of stuff in terms of being able to get to the functionality of the camera system without digging into menus. And over here, you will see this is where all of your media is. So we have 2 card slots, which are for SD cards. You'll see that we have 2 CFast card slots, and we can switch between which ones we are recording to with the camera. And lastly, in terms of additional functionality, it's this menu button here. And when we access the menu on the camera system, you can see that here, and it is a touch-based menu system. So let's go ahead and go through that and take a look at some of the features that we can access through that menu. So the first menu that we have in here are our record options, and as you can see cycling through, there are sometimes more than one page that are available to you within a particular area or section of the menu system. And on the first page of the record menu, we have our options for our codecs and our formats. Now, unique to the URSA Mini Pro 4.6K, we have the capability in this camera to record internally in RAW or in ProRes, and in RAW all the way up to lossless, and in ProRes all the way up to ProRes XQ. And we can record internally in ProRes and RAW all the way up to a 4.6K resolution, and we also have other resolutions available to us. And now we can move over to our second menu, which is monitor, and we can see there are 2 pages here. And this is really where we go in and we start to decide where we're pushing what to different places when we're using the camera. So when we have it set to LCD, we can decide whether or not we're pushing a LUT or not to this LCD screen. We can go ahead and push a clean feed to that if we want to with no overlays. We can have frame guides on. We can go ahead and turn on false color, so on and so forth. So now we move over to our audio controls, and right now we are taking a look at our levels from the built-in microphone on the camera system. Of course, we would only use that for scratch audio, but if we were, as you can see here, using an external audio solution, here we have a wireless dual channel receiver, then what we can do is we can change our inputs here to reflect where that input is going, and these are being plugged into the XLR inputs of our camera. Let's pop over to the setup menu, and as we swipe through these different pages here, you can see that there are a lot of options in terms of how we can customize the camera system. When we get to the third page here, this is where we can set things like our function keys on the front left of the camera systems. Second to last menu is presets, and when we access that, this is really where we create presets based on how the camera is set up with all of these options that we've been taking a look at, and you can quickly and easily either import those from a card if you want to, or you can create a preset from your settings, so you can go in here and type in the name of the preset and you can actually save that. And then the last section has to do with LUTs. And right now we have access to just one LUT, which is the 4.6K film to video LUT. And that's actually what we're pushing when we turn on and off the LUTs in the monitor section of the menu system. But we can in fact go ahead and we can import additional LUTs if we'd like to and use those in our workflow. All right, now let's go ahead and take a look at what we can access through the touchscreen when we're not in the menus, which is actually quite a lot of stuff here. So in the top left, if I just press that, we have access to a lot of controls. The first one being our zebra controls, and just to note here, you cannot go below 75%, at least in the current firmware that we're using with the camera system. And we also have things like peaking and guides and a lot of other things that are easily accessible inside of here. Also the ability to turn on false color if you like to use that with your camera system. So now let's move over here to our white balance settings in the camera system, and this definitely warrants a conversation. You'll see here that with our daylight preset selected, that we have this value down here on the bottom right, which also is reflected here at the top of the screen, which is a tint value. If it's a positive value, it's more magenta. If it's a minus value, it's more green. And depending on when you're watching this video, there may be future firmware updates that change how this is all working. But right now, I'm finding as an operator that the functionality of this is very different depending on the lighting conditions that I'm in, which is true of any camera system. But I'm not necessarily, especially when I'm in a LUT-based workflow and I'm using LUTs in the camera system, necessarily seeing what I would expect to see in those different lighting conditions. I have found that I get excellent results when I go into the camera, and if I want to create my own custom white balance, I can press auto white balance and then take a sampling. It'll choose a color temperature based on my lighting and also a tint value. But I do want to stress that with this camera system, you can shoot internally in RAW up to lossless and in ProRes all the way up to ProRes XQ, which means that you can push and pull this image to pretty much anywhere you want, regardless of whether or not the initial results using a LUT-based workflow are exactly what you want. But I do recommend that you go in here and you load up some additional LUTs into the camera system so that you can take that camera into these different shooting scenarios and really find that formula that works for you overall. Another important thing with the camera system, where do you format your cards? We didn't see that option in the menu system. It's actually right here. You just go ahead and press on this area and you can format your cards right here. And one last thing while we're here, if you swipe right or left, you can access and add metadata to your clips and to your project, which can be especially useful if you're using DaVinci Resolve. And DaVinci Resolve Studio comes with the URSA Mini Pro 4.6K camera as part of the purchase. So that should give you a pretty good overview of the URSA Mini Pro and some of the key features you should be considering if you're going to be using it in your productions. What I want to do now is go into the menu and just show you how we had this camera set up for our test footage. What we did with this camera is we actually recorded in both RAW lossless at 4.6K and also in ProRes XQ at 4.6K. I do want to note though that when you are using this camera in RAW, that when you are in anything but 4.6K, and let's just go ahead and take a look at the field of view there, that when you switch your resolutions, it will be sensor windowed. So for instance, here's Ultra HD, and you can see that's windowed there. So you should be aware of that, again, when you are shooting in RAW. When we are shooting in ProRes, unless we are changing aspect ratio, we are not windowing by default. You can see that when we switch here between 4.6K and our Ultra HD, that we are not windowing. But if you want to window, you can. You just go over here to the second menu under Record, and you turn on that windowing, and you can see that the camera will do that for you as well. So let's go ahead and turn off that windowing, and we're going to go back here and make sure we're in 4.6K for ProRes XQ and also for our RAW lossless. And now we're going to go ahead and take a look at those test shots. Here are our 3 shooting scenarios that we are going to be showing you, and they are an interior low light example, an exterior example, and also a mixed lighting example. And just one more note regarding the recording options for this particular camera. In a future firmware update, we will be seeing the addition of Blackmagic RAW. In fact, when you watch this video, it may already be available for the camera. Our first clip for the URSA Mini Pro 4.6K is this low light example. And here are the settings that we had when we were recording RAW into the camera system. Now we're taking a look at that footage without any information up on the screen. Do remember though, if you're watching it as part of this video, that this is heavily compressed, and we urge you to download the original files to see what this image actually has in it in terms of information. And just for reference, this is the same image with a Rec. 709 LUT applied to it, so you can get a sense of what happens to the image there. Just a general note regarding the Rec. 709 LUTs that are being applied to this footage in the series. They're really just to give you an example of what you might be looking at if you had a viewing LUT up on a monitor in production. Now we're taking a look at the settings for the URSA Mini Pro 4.6K recording internally to ProRes 444XQ. Here it is without any information up on the screen, so you can get a sense of what that log footage looks like. But again, until you download the original footage, this is just a representation. Now we're looking at that same footage with a Rec. 709 LUT applied. You're probably not going to see a huge difference between the raw footage and this ProRes footage within the context of this video, because again, this is heavily compressed and obviously a lot of the information has been lost in this particular file. So our low light test was really again to do something where we were shooting in low light and pushing the sensor a little bit. Just a large soft key source. We had a little bit of light in the background. We wanted to make sure that there was some color in that image so that you could see how it reacts to that, but also to make sure that we had dynamic range in the frame. For our exterior, we wanted to simulate as close as we could bright daylight, but with high dynamic range throughout the image. We're not using any bounce cards. There's no negative fill. We're just using the light that is available to us in that space. You can see our settings here for our raw recording. And here we are taking a look at that actual frame in its entirety. And you can see here that we are trying to capture a lot of dynamic range here. And now we're taking a look at that same frame with a Rec. 709 LUT applied. Of course, download the footage and you can apply a LUT or grade the footage as you like. Now we're looking at our settings, recording internally to the camera in ProRes. And here's our full frame of that image without any information up on the screen. And now we're taking a look at that frame with that Rec. 709 LUT applied. Here's our last scenario, which is really a mixed bag here, where we have a lot of dynamic range and some mixed lighting going on, and the settings for our camera when we're recording in RAW. And now we're just taking a look at that clip without any information up on the screen. And when we apply our Rec. 709 LUT, you can really see that mixed lighting in that environment. We're using lots of practicals. There's obviously daylight coming into the space. And we also have a couple of fixtures that are playing here. The main one is our key light for our main talent in the foreground. And then there's a small light down there in the back left of the frame, which is just basically throwing a little bit of a pool of light into that shadowy area to lift it a little bit. And again, the goal was to show you and give you something with some real dynamic range to play with in the image. Now we're taking a look at our settings recording into ProRes internally in the camera system. Here it is, so you can just take a look at that frame recorded that way. Again, when we're comparing in this camera RAW versus ProRes, you absolutely have to download the files to determine the differences between the two. And finally, we're taking a look at that image with a Rec. 709 LUT applied. Again, just want to reiterate, the purpose of applying the LUTs was not to grade the image or to get to a particular look. It was just to put something over that original footage so you could get a sense of what happens to the dynamic range of the image and also to the colors. But unless you download the original footage and apply your own LUTs or grade the footage yourself, you're really not going to get a true sense of what you can do with the footage from this particular camera. So the goal here, regardless of low light, exterior, or sort of a mixed lighting situation, was to show you a lot of dynamic range within each of these images. So we were exposing for middle gray to where we should have for each of those cameras, and that allowed us to make sure that we had proper exposure for you to start with your images. So there you have it. That is the URSA Mini Pro 4.6K from Blackmagic Design, and hopefully this video has given you a good sense of what this camera system is and also where it might fit in your production workflows. Please download the sample footage that we took with this particular camera system, recorded at its highest resolution and highest quality internally, so that you can load that up into your favorite NLE or your color grading software and check out what that footage is capable of. We also recommend that you check out the other videos in this series with the other 5 cameras that we're covering. Thanks for watching.